Belki bir enerji firması da siyahı.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so you don't need
Okay,
to.
so what is this?
These are our.
O açıdan yani. Duyuyorum, duyuyorum.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Carmen A. DeFilio. I'm the director of IECEC, and we've got a full program tonight, so I'm just going to make some very brief introductions of our guest speakers. Our guest speaker, honored guest speaker, Costis Stambolis. He is the executive director of the Institute of Energy for Southeast Europe. He has extensive industrial and economic experience in energy, and has authored several papers and books on broad aspects of energy and policy, including renewable energy. Sitting next to me is Ambassador Mita Rendi, and he is currently an independent board member of NG, and he has had important ambassadorial positions in Qatar and at the OECD in Paris, and has extensive industrial, financial, and academic experience, and is especially knowledgeable on the topic that we're talking about today, energy security in this region. And Professor Ahmet Evan, to my left, is the senior scholar at the Istanbul Policy Center upstairs, and is the Jean Monnet Chair at Sabancı University. And since his work at Columbia University, he has become one of the foremost scholars in the world on politics, culture, and development. So these are our three speakers. We will hear from Mr. Stambolis on energy security in Southeast Europe. Mr. Stambolis.
Sayın Büyükelçi Bey Mehmet Rende, değerli Rektör Bey Ahmet Evin, sevgili Sabancı Üniversitesi'nin mensupları, sevgili arkadaşlar ve işbirlikçilerim, sevgili Dr. DeFilio, bayanlar ve beyler. Begur Istanbul International Center for Energy and Climate, daveti üzeri Sabancı Üniversitesi'nin boyu bir şişkin dinleyici topluluğu önünde enstitümüzden iş arkadaşlarımla Bey Niko Sofyano, Bey Dimitri Mezartasoglu ile aranızda bulunduğum için bilhassa çok mutluyum ve siz teşekkür ederim. Türkiye ile ilişkim çok eskidir. Solar Energy Society of Turkey açılış töreni'nde konuşman için Ahmet Vatansever tarafından aldığım davetiye üzerine ilk defa olarak İstanbul'u 1978'de ziyaret ettim. O zamandan beri Türkiye'ye ziyaretim hem iş ikabi hem de turist olarak bir hali oldu. So, the rest in English. And one of the reasons that I said these few words in Turkish, apart from thanking the school and my dear colleagues and many friends who are here today. I owe explanation about the origin of my name. My name is Stambolis, and it is coming from Istanbul. And why it's coming from Istanbul? Because one of my great-great-grandfathers, who was from Arcadia in Peloponnesus, in South Greece, had developed a lot of trade relations with merchants in Istanbul back in the 1850s. The original name was Palamidis, but there were hundreds of Palamidis in this place. So the grandfather kept the name Stambolis, and then it developed into Stambolis. So this is my relationship, and I'm sorry that I do not speak Turkish, but I intend to learn. So another incident is that my parents, during the terrible and really repulsive and violent German occupation of Greece back in 1943, 1944, found shelter in the hospitable environment of Izmir, where they were fortunate enough to have many good Turkish friends. Now, coming to modern times, since 2007, when IENE introduced the Southeast Europe Energy Dialogue series of high-level meetings in Thessaloniki and in other places, we had the opportunity and the pleasure to welcome many distinguished Turkish energy experts. Some of them are here with us today, who participated in these conferences and other events, developing excellent cooperation and friendly relationships. As a matter of fact, we have cooperated with some of them in study projects and research programs. At IENE, we strongly believe that the energy sector is particularly suited in developing friendships and partnerships while promoting mutually advantageous projects and business solutions. At IENE, we're not just talking about the need of fostering friendship and cooperation, but we prove it on a daily basis. The last time I visited Turkey was to participate at the international conference, the 6th IEC International Energy Forum, convened by Mrs. Güler Sabanci, who invited me along with the honorary president, Dr. Fatih Birol, also a good friend of mine. It was a very enjoyable and very educative experience where the latest developments in energy, both at international level and in Turkey, were addressed by carefully selected speakers of international standing. Today, I'm among you, together with my colleagues, in order to share some thoughts and ideas on energy security that we have had the opportunity to examine in the context of the major reference study. Some of you know about it, which was completed earlier this year, the Southeast Europe Energy Outlook. Some introductory words defining energy security. It's very important to define this. Then some energy insights, some on energy security, redefinition of the South Corridor, where Turkey's role is very important, and the role of Greece and Turkey in European energy security. IENE goes back to 2003. We're a fairly young organization, but we have moved very fast, and we have developed cooperation all along Southeast Europe, and we cover an extensive range of fields in the energy sector. We concentrate on the core countries of Southeast Europe, which you see here marked in blue, and of course we are aware and we study also the peripheral countries, because we think it's very important to understand the ring around Southeast Europe, because this is where we have interchange of energy flows. IENE's mission and vision is very simple. It's a platform, a little more than a platform. We try to foster cooperation all over Southeast Europe. We contribute analysis, studies, events. We provide our members with qualitative information of the latest developments. And we are open to cooperation and projects across the board. We publish extensively newsletters, reports, surveys, studies, analysis, and so forth. The energy dialogue in Southeast Europe, which we started in 2007, is a very important development in the course of IENE, because for the first time we managed to bring together some top-level people, experts from the different countries, but the interesting thing is that we managed to stage this every year, and with more and more enthusiasm. And this developed into workshops right and left, and it all adds up to the body of knowledge which we try to organize and take advantage, and then to reveal to a broader audience, release to a broader audience. Southeast Europe Energy Outlook 2007, a major step in the development of the Institute, followed earlier this year by Southeast Europe Energy Outlook 2016. I mention these two publications because these are the publications which have provided us the body of knowledge and experience on which we can draw upon and discuss the various issues. So we believe in studies, we believe in cooperation in doing the studies, and you see here the team of people who contributed to this study, about 24 individuals and companies. It was peer-reviewed by the IEA for the first time, and we are very thankful to Dr. Birol for arranging this. So we had the benefit of the advice and knowledge of a major international organization. And you see here how the study is structured. But you can, if you visit IENE's website, there is an extensive executive summary where you can see all this, and we have brought also some brochure with us. Raison d'etre, why a regional approach? It may look easily understood. You do a regional study. Why a regional study? IEA does a global study. OPEC does a global study. Many other organizations do global studies. Why a regional study? What new is there to offer? We think it has a lot to offer in the sense that decisions are usually taken at micro level and are taken by governments. And the better you understand this procedure, the easier it is to formulate policy. So a regional approach, we believe, is important when it comes to policy formulation at country level, but also, of course, at regional level. Methodology, data acquisition analysis from various conferences, workshops, but also reports. Analysis using various conventional analytical tools, computer simulation, as you'll see later. Close cooperation with independent academic institutions, and then the synthesis of the study which is taking place in-house. South Europe at a glance. We see here that Southeast Europe, we're talking about the 13 countries in a region, the blue one, if you remember the first slide, are in themselves important energy consumers. And we see here what it means in terms of oil, gas, and consumption, and what percentage this is to the EU28, which is not insignificant. Oil, we're talking about almost 14%, gas almost 17%, and electricity about 18%. So these are not negligible figures. The energy mix of the region is also important because we'll come to that when we discuss energy security. We have an axiom whereby the energy mix and the balanced energy mix is one of the best ways to secure good energy security. So we see here the energy mix in 2005 and 2015, including Turkey. And it's very important to make these differentiations because we have several studies in Southeast Europe which do not include Turkey. And we think this is a disadvantage and a great omission because Turkey and the rest of the countries is 50-50. I mean, Turkey, grosso modo, and the rest, 12 countries, 50% Turkey, 50% the rest of the countries. So it's a major player with very active and existing energy flows in oil, in gas, and electricity. So you have to take Turkey into account when you study the region. So we see an energy mix in 2005, which is dominated by solid fuels and oil, and partially by gas. And we see this in 2015, where solid fuels are still strong and stronger, oil is diminishing, and gas is slightly up, and of course we have the entrance of renewables. What these slides tell us is that there is a change, but it's a very slow change. Now, whether this is going to accelerate as we go ahead or not, we don't know. We think it's going to accelerate. But if we judge by what's been happening in the last 10, 15 years, it's an almost glacial change in terms of the energy mix. So that's something we have to note. Gross inland consumption by source, as you see here in 2005, 2015, almost the same picture. And we go to the energy demand and supply projections in Southeast Europe. It's important to know what is the outlook. Also, when discussing energy security, it's important to have this in mind. So we organized information in terms of modeling. We had good cooperation with Professor Kapros from the Technical University of Athens. Many of you happen to know him. And on the various assumptions we made in terms of demographic, technological, microeconomic, we ran a model which is middle of the way. That is not excessive reduction of CO2 and not excessive use of coal. So just to give you two examples. Demographics are very important to consider when making such models. Also the annual change in terms of population, the GDP trend in the countries we studied, in all 13 countries, and the annual change in GDP in Southeast Europe, average annual growth rate per countries, etc. All in all, there were more than 40 different variables used in this model. Now, what we come up, you'll see here, in terms of gross inland consumption over the next 30 years, go to 2050, and we see an interesting situation where Turkey is the only country, the only region which is actually is going to consume more energy compared to the other countries where energy consumption appears flat, with small differentiations, but appears flat. And this doesn't happen only in this model, but in several other models. Final energy demand, again, we have the same situation. We have Turkey developing energy demand at high rate for known reasons, demographic, economics, and the variation of differentiation of sources of energy. We have nuclear coming up in 2023, 2025. This is something which we have factored into the study. And the rest of the country is more or less flat. Primary energy production. Here we have a slightly different view. Of course, giving incentives to develop local energy production is a very good solution towards achieving greater energy security. And this is happening, but you see Turkey again is the only country which appears to be developing more and more its own primary energy production. The other countries, again, we see with small variations almost the same flat curve. Net imports, here we have a differentiation. Turkey, because of its huge expansion of its energy balance and energy use, is going to increase inevitably its imports. And the other countries appear to be lowering their imports, but not in any dramatic level. Gross electricity generation, again the same story. And installed power generation capacity, we see here that Turkey, of course, as expected, is going to increase its installed power generation. But in this case, we see other countries too increasing their power generation and also having more efficient power generation. Energy security is normally defined as the uninterrupted supply of energy at affordable prices, with a more modern definition augmenting it with while addressing environmental concerns. Now, these two notions do not necessarily match, but this is, I think, one of the basic efforts now undertaken by the EU, by IEA, in China is trying very hard to address this issue. We have short-term energy security and we have long-term energy security worries. And all these are linked to investments in energy supply and infrastructure, but also on the ability, when it comes to short-term energy security, on the ability of the energy system to react promptly to sudden changes in the supply-demand balance. And we see this very often. We see this in cases like very recently Kurdistan, which stopped the flow of oil through Turkey down to Sheikhan because of external reasons, and the external reasons because there was a conflict going on, and this is how the supply of oil was uninterrupted. We saw this in the case of Russia in 2006 and 2009, where the gas supply was interrupted, the transition of gas through Ukraine for political reasons. So it was not because of lack of supply, but because of external reasons. And this is something which comes very strongly into our discussion in energy cooperation, that is the external reasons which affect energy supply, energy security. So all in all, energy security is a complex issue, and you have to break this down in terms of definitions, in terms of the various fuels, and in terms of geography. We come now to Southeast Europe. What are the key issues? We have the supply-demand and the differentiation of supply sources. We have the security of transportation, the smooth supply of electricity and gas, and the effective protection of energy infrastructure. And this is something which is coming into our discussion very lately because of increased terrorism incidents. And we'll explain this later. So we have supply, demand, transportation, flow of electricity, gas, and external reasons such as security of the actual infrastructure. A number of measures are proposed in order to strengthen the available mechanism. And these measures have been proposed by the EU. They have done various exercises over the last 4 or 5 years. They have established an emergency and solidarity mechanism, especially on gas, which is now broadened into oil, coal, and gas stocks. In fact, oil started much earlier. Just let me remind you, after the oil crisis in 1973, we had the formation of the IEA, and the IEA imposed to its country members of OECD, including Turkey and Greece and other countries in Europe, USA, Australia, Japan, they imposed very strict stock requirements, that is levels in terms of days of consumption and in actual percentage of use. So oil is taken care of in terms of energy security. Coal, because of diminishing demand and consumption, is no problem. A lot of the stocks are held in the yards of the stations. Gas stocks, similarly, underground, which is a major issue becoming more and more important. And the new element is the transportation of gas, which did not exist before, say 20, 30, 40 years before, because the various countries were not as gasified as they are today. So we have a different situation today in terms of the gas contribution to the energy mix, and hence related energy security problems to the gas, which were not apparent and they were not there 40 years ago. So we have new factors coming into the situation of energy security as the various energy balances get differentiated or as energy use started being used in a different way by several countries, a very noted example being the entry in the energy mix of renewable energy sources. Renewable energy sources, 20 years ago, it was not accountable. It was not even put in any energy balance in any of the countries. It started coming into the energy balance about 10 years ago, and very strongly over the last 5 years, as Dr. Mustafa Tiris can attest to you. So we have new factors coming into the picture, and this inevitably determine energy security. The legal and institutional framework for energy security is very important to have a good legal framework, like the one that the EU is now trying to establish and Turkey has established. It's very interesting to note, and we mentioned this in our study, that Turkey, although is not part of the EU, has introduced most of the European acquis in terms of energy into its system. So that gives us an advantage when it comes to carry on negotiations or trade relations with other countries in the EU. And therefore, the legal and institutional framework for energy is important and can be strengthened further. It leads to stress tests, it leads to strong diligence, and in developing a mechanism which is always ready to meet any eventualities in terms of energy security from external factors. Energy security for gas supply. This is the latest development in EU. We have the IICEC priority project. They established a separate committee at first, then a small organization to be able to promote and to accelerate the use of gas and the flow of gas between the different countries. And this is what you see here. And we have the new factors, as we were called, as I mentioned earlier, the security of infrastructure. And here we have identified some hotspots in Southeast Europe, and you see some of them are already in Turkey, some in Greece, some in Italy, down in the Danube, where there are problems, existing or potential problems, past problems when it comes to physical hazards like flooding or earthquakes, when it comes to very apparent terrorist threats. For example, the Dardanelles is a very challenging situation when it comes to safeguarding, when organizing the safe passage of vessels through the Dardanelles. We have the Ceyhan hub, again the same thing. We have a narrow strip of land between Athens and Corinth, where almost 70% of the country's industrial production on energy is there, so another hot spot and very accessible. And we also have the crossing in the Adriatic, which is also very susceptible to terrorism threats. So that's something which we did not have 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we wouldn't even think or discuss such issues. Now we do. So the energy security is becoming even more diversified. Today, the European Union, the EU28, is more than 53% energy import dependent, and unfortunately, this dependence is growing rather than diminishing. So we have a problem here. And hence, the policymakers are trying to promote the energy diversification. That is diversification in terms of supply, but also in terms of transportation corridors. So we have here a very real situation where the policy makers and strategists say, look, we must by all means try to diversify because we had a problem with Russia, we may have a problem tomorrow with Norway, which we get things, or we may have a problem tomorrow with Algeria, which is another main supplier. So let's increase the number of suppliers, but also at the same time increase the number of corridors. And now we come to the South Corridor, because the South Corridor has originally started being developed through Turkey, and we are happy to say that it's still going through Turkey, and we have the TANAP-TAP gas pipeline system, which is a major system, which in 2 years will start bringing some gas, originally from Azerbaijan, but we think later on from other sources in the region. At the same time, we have new routes coming up. I mean, the TANAP-TAP pipeline is something which is happening, is being constructed. We have timetables, but we have other potential projects like the East Mediterranean gas pipeline, and we have several LNG liquefaction projects floating around. Because of several new projects, we think that we need to talk about a redefinition of the South Corridor. We need to talk about a broadening of the South Corridor. And this is very important in terms of energy security, because as you will see here, by developing a broader South Corridor, an expanded South Corridor, we can increase the security of energy supply, not only of the countries going through, like Turkey and Greece, but the whole of Southeast Europe and Europe proper. So we here have the various new pipelines, as you see, the Turkish Stream, which is happening, the TANAP-TAP pipeline, which is happening, the IGB, which is the connection between Greece and Bulgaria. We have potential projects like the East Med project, and we have IAP, another potential project, and the vertical corridor, which is a very interesting corridor, because the vertical corridor, it is an amalgamation of existing pipelines, which can be made very effective and operative through small outlays. So there is already the infrastructure in place, and it's a question of the transmission system operators devising the necessary protocols to energize and activate this vertical corridor, which could bring gas from south to north and vice versa. So that's because we have this grouping of new routes, we think we need to redefine the South Corridor to include all of them, and also the various add-on infrastructure, such as LNG terminals, especially FSRU terminals, that is the floating LNG, which again was not there 10 or 15 years ago. This is the latest developments. So Turkey has an advantage on that. It has already one in operation, another one which is being constructed to be delivered next year. Greece is following with an LNG FSRU terminal in northern Greece, and the Revithoussa land-based terminal, which is being expanded to increase its storage. Storage is another major component in terms of energy security, and it makes no sense to discuss strengthening your supply in terms of diversification or new routes without taking into consideration the important element of storage, because having storage enables you to move between summer and winter, it enables you to trade gas more efficiently, and increases your security of supply. This is another pipeline made of small pipelines, the BRU pipeline project, running from Romania, Hungary down to Austria, and gas interconnections throughout Southeast Europe. Growing importance of LNG, not only in terms of terminals, but also in terms of supply. LNG has started competing in many occasions, not always, in many occasions with main gas pipeline systems. And because of the price competition, it enables LNG to take part of the load coming so far from main gas pipelines. So we see again the picture changing, and how LNG, which was very expensive 20 or 15 years ago, coming into the picture to augment supplies. There are existing and planned LNG terminals in South Europe, and the more LNG terminals we have, the more obviously the energy security is being strengthened. However, we have to ensure that these terminals operate on a commercially competitive basis, because we have instances where LNG terminals have stayed idle for many years. We don't want this. We want them to be fully actively involved. Electricity connections, another aspect of energy security. And now we come finally to the role of Turkey in European energy security, which we think is very important in terms of geostrategic, has big geostrategic significance for the Euro-Atlantic community. We refer to the Crimea crisis after 2017 and how Turkey can become a reliable transit country, a direct and open gateway to the Middle East energy resources, because it's not only the TANAP tap, but we have to consider gas coming from Iran. We have to consider also gas coming from Russia. I mean, Turkey could become a very interesting and very competitive route for Russian gas to Europe. Most of the Russian gas until now was going through northern part, through Ukraine, through Belarus, through the Baltics. Now we are developing, Turkey is developing the south route, of course the Turkish Stream, but the south route is coming into prominence. And this is a key and fundamental aspect of energy security. So we see that Turkey has a very important role for the energy security of the whole region. Turkey's role as an energy bridge, energy hub, can be better understood if we consider the following. Almost 5% of global oil flows goes through Turkey every day. Turkey's existing gas interconnections, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Iran, Greece, already provide small but significant, up to about 1 BCM per year, gas imports into the European gas system today, not tomorrow. And this is going to increase tenfold with TANAP TAP and 20-fold with Turkish Stream. And anticipated power generating overcapacity after the nuclear plant's commissioning in 2023-2024 will further enhance Turkey's role as a regional energy player. And continuing improvements and upgrades of Turkey's oil and gas infrastructure and latest LNG land-based and FSRU terminal additions help strengthen the country's energy security and inter alia its role as a regional energy supplier for Europe. We'll skip that. This is a very interesting graph because it shows the importance of Turkey in terms of the infrastructure. And this is how Turkey's role as a regional oil and gas hub works. In a study we did 2014, where Mr. Yardim participated and we had a very good cooperation, we established the possibility of 2 major gas hubs, trading hubs, one in Turkey and one in Greece. Now, gas trading hubs are important in the sense of, in 2 senses. First of all, they bring a new concept into the trading of gas. So trading of gas is important. The more trades you have, the more gas you need and the more diversification you need. So in order to trade gas, you need diversified supplies, you need a highly liquid market in order to trade. And having a highly liquid market means that you have increased energy security. And gas trading hubs do help towards this direction, we believe. This is a standard hub design, and this is the course of the development over the time frame of the various hubs. And this is how we see the hub developing in Greece, with the various new gas flows happening mainly in northern Greece, but also in southern Greece. So this will increase 5-fold the liquidity of gas in the country. In Turkey, 20-fold or 30-fold, in Greece about 5-fold. Now, having a gas hub operating in Greece and one in Turkey, and Turkey is already fairly advanced on that because of the Istanbul Energy Exchange. Greece's energy exchange is being set up and will be operational at the end of 2018, early 2019. So there could be competition between the 2 hubs, which is not bad, because if I was a trader, energy trader specializing on gas, I would like to have contracts both in Turkey and Greece and try to see where I can sell gas better. So, we reach the end. In view of the growing supply uncertainties, combined with external and quite predictable price volatility, a country may achieve a relatively secure energy flow by ensuring that its energy balance, and particularly its power generation, is not dominated by single fuel. So we come to the old discussion of the energy mix and how a well-balanced energy mix is, we believe, one of the best guarantees in terms of energy security. Having a good energy balance provides a lot of, gives you a lot of protection from outside factors coming in to disrupt the operation of your system. So a well-balanced energy mix can offer adequate protection against potential oil and gas flow disruptions. And here we see an example of the energy mix of 3 countries in the region: Romania, Greece, and Turkey. Romania has one of the best energy mixes because it has solid fuels in electricity, it has nuclear, it has oil, and it has renewables. Greece and Turkey have introduced renewables and gas over the last few years, but they don't have the balanced situation where we observe in Romania, even today in 2015. So developing a balanced energy mix, we think, adds very much to enhancement of energy security. I think we've reached the end of the presentation. We have some information on investment outlook, but this we can develop in our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am sorry I didn't